a cold, brutal, and methodical assassin named the Killer has been contracted to eliminate an influential bookkeeper in Paris. The killer has been waiting for 5 days with no sign of his target. Regardless, he continues to watch and wait in silence for the perfect moment to strike. However, he begins to grow exhausted and boredom sets in, with his pulse occasionally rising and falling. He soon embraces music as therapy, trying to calm his nerves and focus on the task ahead. Hello, welcome back to IM Movies. Today we're looking into the 2023 American action thriller film titled The Killer. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now let's get back right into it. Hours later, the killer begins to observe movements around the building, expecting his target to walk in as soon as possible. Still, he gets nothing. Then he decides to distract himself with yoga just to waste away time. Later, the killer steps out to get food and briefly stops to check his scooter. On his way back, he calls his contractor, Hodges, also known as the lawyer, to express his concerns. Unfortunately, the lawyer says he doesn't have any intel on when the target will show up, but he's hoping he shows up soon. The killer says he'll wait it out for 2 more days before quitting, and the lawyer says it's fair. However, the lawyer also reminds him of the consequences that will follow if he fails. The killer drops the call, destroys his cell phone, and sits outside to eat his meal. Later, he continues to watch everyone and everything moving around the building. After a while, he begins to assemble his sniper rifle in readiness. Hours pass, the day silently turns to night, and he still gets nothing. He tries to sleep, but he can't seem to get it. He becomes worried, impatient, and sloppy. Finally, he sees a lady opening the windows of the top floor, indicating that someone important is about to show up. The killer watches in anticipation, hoping to see his target. Fortunately for him, it's the bookkeeper. Immediately, the killer begins to assemble his rifle once again, preparing to strike. Finally, the bookkeeper arrives with a lady who changes into something sexy for him. Soon, she begins to dance, and the killer continues to watch in anticipation, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He also needs a pulse rate under 60 and a measured squeeze to get a perfect shot. Finally, the killer takes the shot, but it hits the lady instead. Realizing his mistake, the killer packs up his things, puts on his helmet, and rushes downstairs to hop on his bike. Police arrive with an ambulance, and the killer quickly rides off. Immediately, he begins to dispose of evidence of his involvement as he rides through the streets of Paris trying to avoid cops. Later, the killer stops at the foot of a bridge and later disposes of his helmet in a river. He walks into a store's restroom to clean himself up with atomized nitro, shaves his beard, and changes his clothes before heading to the airport. At the airport, the killer finally reports the incident to the lawyer, and he seems disappointed but promises to take care of things with the client. While on the airplane, the killer sees a strange man staring at him and soon becomes suspicious of him. Hours later, they land in Miami, and the killer soon realizes that the suspicious man will be boarding the same flight as him. Fortunately for him, there is an announcement from the airport offering free vouchers for anyone willing to give up their sit and wait for the next flight to Santo Domingo. The killer takes the offer, in an attempt to get away from the suspicious-looking man. Later, he lodges in a hotel and begins to get suspicious, expecting the suspicious-looking guy to come after him. But no one does. The next day, the killer finally arrives in Santo Domingo and drives home. On getting home, he sees a footprint leading inside his home, and soon realizes that his house has been under attack. Walking in, the killer sees bloodstains and broken glasses all over the floor. Immediately, he puts a call through to his brother-in-law, Marcus, and this is when he realizes that his wife has been attacked. He rushes down to the hospital and sees his wife fatally injured in the intensive care unit. Later, Marcus informs the killer that his wife was attacked by a man and a woman, stating that the killer's wife managed to stab the man in his leg while they were fighting. Marcus also adds that the assassins left in a green taxi and also expresses his concerns for his sister. However, the killer assures Marcus that he'll make sure nothing of such ever happens again. After some days, the killer begins to arrange for his wife to be transported to a private hospital in Punta Cana. Soon, his wife finally gains consciousness and explains to him how she'd fought bravely for her life. Later, the killer begins to gear up for revenge as he carefully prepares to look for the perpetrators. First, he locates the green taxi company that Marcus had mentioned. Later that same night, he robs the place and finds out that a guy named Leo Rodriguez was the driver who drove the assassin to his house. So, to track him down, the killer steals Leo's employee file. However, the next day, he sends a parcel to the office of the lawyer through FedEx. Reason? Well, you'll find out later. Later that same day, he patiently waits outside the taxi company as he anticipates the arrival of Leo at the green taxi company. Soon, Leo shows up, and the killer begins to trail him. After trailing him for a while, the killer orders a ride from Leo, and as soon as they start their journey, the killer points his gun at Leo. Now Leo thinks the killer is a robber, so he offers his wallet to him. After this, the killer asks Leo about his trip 3 days ago. Leo soon begins to narrate his ordeal with the assassins, stating that he'd driven them to private property. He also adds that the male assassin had come back with a bloodied leg, confirming Marcus's story. Leo continues as he tries to prove his innocence, but the killer ends his life. Next, the killer gets on a plane to New Orleans to give the lawyer a surprise visit. He rents a bus, drives to one of his storage facilities, arms himself, and also changes his plate number. Later, he buys a garbage bin, a power screwdriver, and acid solutions for his quest for vengeance. Soon, he parks outside the lawyer's office, waiting for the parcel he had sent through FedEx earlier to arrive. Well, now you know why he sent the parcel in the first place. Minutes later, the FedEx truck arrives and he's soon granted access to the building. However, the killer was able to cunningly use this opportunity to gain access too. He gets to the lawyer's office with the FedEx guy and waits patiently outside as he watches the door close slowly. The FedEx guy later comes out, leaving the door open, and the killer quietly steps inside with his gun. The lawyer's secretary, Dolores, begins to panic as soon as she sees the killer. The killer grabs Dolores's phone and laptop, and she leads the way as they both go to the lawyer's office. The lawyer tells the killer that he's made a grave mistake and needs to redeem himself by leaving immediately and never returning. However, the killer doesn't care. He only wants revenge. So, he orders Dolores to tie the lawyer to his chair and tie herself in the restroom. The killer asks the lawyer about the people that attacked his wife, but the lawyer claims he didn't have an idea and begins to blame the killer for going home in the first place. Later, the killer damages the laptops and phones using his power screwdriver. This suggests that the lawyer must have files of the assassin, but the lawyer claims it's all on the laptop that was just destroyed. The killer doesn't believe this, but seeing that the lawyer is not ready to give up any info, the killer uses the power screwdriver to push 3 9-gauge nails into his chest, giving him an opportunity to call 911 within 7 minutes if he gives up the names of the assassins. Unfortunately, the lawyer dies earlier than the killer had expected. In the restroom, Dolores has been trying to kill herself with a drug overdose, but it doesn't have any effect on her. Hence, she offers to give up the names of the assassins if the killer promises not to make her disappear, stating that her kids will need evidence of her death to collect her life insurance. The killer puts the lawyer's body in the garbage bin, and they soon step into the elevator. Later, a lady and a guy join them in the elevator, and the man jokes about helping the killer dispose of the body. Dolores couldn't hold herself back, and she briefly laughed out loud, knowing that the joke was a reality in disguise. The killer drives Dolores's home and she helps him find the client. The name Claiborne comes up, and the killer recognizes the name. Soon, they step out and the killer ends Dolores's life at the stairs. Later that night, the killer decomposes the lawyer's body in acid and later disposes of it into a river. After that, the killer cleans up the van and returns it the next day, leaving no trace whatsoever. Then he decides to find the male assassin known as the Brute. Seeing that the Brute owns a dog, the killer decides to buy dog treats and lace them up with sleeping pills. However, he continues to trail the Brute all day until he finally gets home alone with his dog. The killer baits Deva, the dog with the treats. Minutes later, he silently steps into the building, seeing that Deva is now asleep. The Brute realizes that someone has broken into his home and soon attacks the killer from behind. They both begin to fight aggressively, but the killer ultimately ends the Brute's life with a gunshot to the head. The sound of the gunshot alerts Deva, and she chases after the killer, but he manages to escape. Before leaving, the killer burns down the house and walks away, having sustained some injuries. The next day, the killer boards a flight going to New York to hunt down the second assassin, known as the Expert. On getting there, the killer boards a train, and later rents a car as he begins to trail the Expert from her house down to a fancy restaurant. The killer quietly sits in front of the Expert and points his gun at her. Seeing this, The expert realizes that she's now living in her final moments. The expert spends her last moments ordering drinks and trying so hard to prove her innocence, but the killer wasn't having any of that. After talking for a while, they both step out, and the killer walks the expert through an isolated area. Soon, she slips and falls on a stair. Then, she asks the killers for help, but he puts a bullet through her head instead. The next day, the killer is in Chicago for Claiborne, the client. The killer sees Claiborne leaving his apartment, and later tries to break into his apartment, but he finds it hard to access it. So he orders a fob copier on Amazon. Soon, he trails Claiborne to a fancy gym named Balaquinox, just 9 minutes away from his house. The killer decides to register at Balaquinox for a 1-week free trial to gain access. While at it, the killer realizes that the janitors have exclusive access to the facility. Now, while waiting for his order, he walks into a Chicago bank and requests that they move all his money to a Caribbean account. Later, the killer buys a gun from a street dealer and picks up his Amazon order. The next day, the killer goes to the gym and steals the exclusive access key from a janitor. Inside the changing room, the killer sees Claiborne getting ready to begin his gym session. As soon as Claiborne leaves, the killer steals his home access card and makes a copy for himself using the fob copier. Later that night, the killer heads over to Claiborne's house and silently makes his way through to Claiborne's apartment using the copied access card. Now, while on a call, Claiborne turns around and he's shocked to see the killer standing in front of him. Claiborne assumes that the killer must be a robber, so he offers to send some money to him, but he soon realizes that the killer has come because of the Paris contract he'd ordered for. The killer asks Claiborne if he has any issues with him, and Claiborne says he doesn't, stating that he even wanted to let go. But the lawyer had asked him to pay an extra $150,000 to cover his trails in order to avoid any blowbacks. Now, it appears that Claiborne doesn't know anything about the attack that happened at the killer's house. We can see that the client is only interested in the stock market. That's why he wanted the influential bookkeeper to be killed. But before the killer leaves, he promises to kill Claiborne in the worst way possible, if he later finds out he's been lying. Days later, we see that the killer's wife has now recovered, and they both happily spend the rest of their lives together quietly on a beach house. One thing that stood out for me in this movie is its theme of unintended consequences. I love how the killer's actions set off a chain reaction that he couldn't have predicted. It serves as a cautionary tale about the potential repercussions of our choices. Overall, The Killer serves as more than just an action thriller. I'll give this movie a solid 6 out of 10. Well, they could have done a better ending to it, but the story was really good, so I'll let it pass. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.